Have you ever stopped and thought about the evolution of a sport throughout the years? Well, today I'd like to inform you about the evolution of the sport of basketball. In doing so, I'll firstly need to talk about the creation of the sport and the creation of a few leagues that in order to play the sport in a professional manner. Afterwards, I'd like to talk about a few rule changes that greatly impacted the way the game has been played. And lastly, I'd like to talk about the differences of how the game is played today to that of a few decades ago. So firstly, who created the sport of basketball? Well, his name is James Naismith. He invented the sport in 1891. The beginnings of the sport greatly differ to that of today. Back then, they used to throw balls into fruit baskets, as according to History.com staff in the article Who Invented Basketball, and I quote, the first games featured 9 players aside, attempting to toss a soccer ball into peach baskets, nailed to the balconies at the ends of a gymnasium, end quote. The first professional basketball league was called the National Basketball League. According to Britannica, in the article National Basketball League, this league was founded in 1898. The league was quickly disbanded a few years after its foundation. This cycle happened to quite a few leagues afterwards, up until the National Basketball Association, or the NBA, which is most commonly known as, was founded in 1949. The NBA became the main professional basketball league. Ever since, the NBA has had very little to no competition. The most competition the NBA has ever had has been the ABA, which was founded in 1967. But the ABA merged with the NBA about 10 years into their foundation. On to the next point, which is about the rule changes that affected the way the game is played. The first is that they ditched the fruit baskets with actual hoops in the early 1900s. As according to Olympic.org in the article Basketball Equipment and History, and I quote, in 1906, the peach baskets were finally replaced by metal hoops with backboards, end quote. Another rule change that changed the game was the allowing of dribbling in 1897. Before 1897, dribbling or bouncing the ball was not allowed. The next rule I'd like to talk about is that goaltending was allowed all the way up to 1944 until the NCAA deemed it illegal to do. According to Oxford Language, goaltending means a violation in which a defensive player interferes with the shot when it is on its downward arc or is on or over the rim. The last rule change I'd like to talk about is the implementation of the three-point line. The three-point line is probably the most influential change in the history of the sport, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later on. The three-point line was implemented and introduced by the ABL in the year 1961. The ABA and NBA followed this step a few years later. Finally, I would like to inform you about the differences in how the game is played in today's age in comparison to a few decades ago. Firstly, with the implementation of the three-point line, there has been a huge increase in the shot attempts, including the three-point shot, mostly because of the Golden State Warriors' success with this strategy, winning 3 championships in the last 6 years. Because they were shooting more, there has been more possessions per game than has there ever been. In the 2019-2020 season, the team with the most possessions per game was of 108 possessions a game. In 2005-2006 NBA season, the highest was 99 possessions per game. The next difference is that players today are much more athletic than the players beforehand. This is because in today's age, there is much more resources for a player to become more athletic and have longer careers. LeBron James, the best player in the world today and maybe in history, revealed that he spends over $1 million a year to keep his body for peak physical performance. And all in all, basketball has gone through a quite few changes since it was first invented, from the implementations of nets and backboards, allowing of dribbling, goaltending becoming illegal, and the creation of a three-point line have all changed the way the sport is played. Whether it's a professional NBA game or a fun park game with a few friends, these evolutions have impacted everyone who plays basketball, which has been for the best.